The stuff I wrote in this book, I was sort of dragged kicking and screaming into accepting that I wanted to take it seriously because I feel silly standing up in front of my peers and arguing about the purpose of the universe and so on. We're used to worrying about religious bias. Oh, do you just believe that because you were raised in a certain way? But there's secular bias as well. There's always groupthink. And, what I was trying to do in the Why book, I suppose, is explore the middle ground between that dichotomy we're always stuck in. Do you believe in the very traditional Western idea of God, or are you a secular atheist? Whose side are you on, Richard Dawkins or the Pope? Make your mind up, which team you're on. And I think we just neglect the middle ground options.
Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Weeks. Welcome to the Bounce Podcast. Many people, particularly those coming from an atheistic or secular philosophical orientation, assume that the universe has no intrinsic purpose. When I look up at a clear night sky, see the stars, vast expanse of space, I do have a sense of awe and wonder. I'm not, in those particular moments, thinking of entropy or randomness. I might when I return to my desk and discover the cat's thrown up all over the carpet. But what if the universe does have a purpose? In some sense, is pointed toward mind and value. That is the thesis of my guest on this episode. I think he would argue that the second law of thermodynamics does not preclude purpose. Entropy just tells you the cost of doing anything. Purpose, if it exists, would tell you what any of it is for. Today I'm talking with Professor Philip Goff. Philip is a British philosopher, author, and professor at Durham University, whose research focuses on philosophy of mind and consciousness. He was an associate professor of philosophy at Central European University and the Department of Philosophy, University of Birmingham. He is also the author of Galileo's Era, A New Science of Consciousness, Consciousness and Fundamental Reality, and his most recent book, Why, The Purpose of the Universe, is the touchstone of this episode. Yes, our conversation covers some very lofty territory. Physics, cosmology, philosophy, even religion. Starting with the fine-tuning problem, we talk about the value hypothesis, Philip's thesis that the universe is oriented toward the emergence of value in complex life, teleological cosmopsychism. This is visualizing the universe as a conscious organism. We discuss the middle ground of belief. Can we move beyond the binary of religion versus atheism? Is there a third way we can explore? Panpsychism, which is a strange but increasingly rigorous theory that consciousness isn't just in our brains, but is fundamental all the way down to the basic building blocks of matter. We talk about evolution and consciousness, why natural selection would care about our inner lives at all. We discuss mystical experiences across traditions, why it keeps showing up with similar themes. We discuss prayer as orientation, not so much as a wish list, like a recentering practice. We discuss Philip's slightly heretical Christianity. He discusses that and a new book he's working on, Eastern Orthodox Inspiration, why it matters to him. And then we get into his framework of religion being a social technology rather than just a set of rigid doctrines. And hey, a quick note, at the very end of this episode, I tack on a short personal addendum. I share how this conversation actually landed for me, how I'm looking at it in a simple way I'm using it. And even if you're skeptical, even if you don't know what you believe, stick around and check that out. And my goal here isn't believe this or believe that. It's to think clearly, stay honest, and maybe see what helps you live. Okay? So, without further ado, I give you Philip Goff.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Where are you?
I'm in Durham, in the far north of England, very near Newcastle.
So then you're still philosophy professor there at Durham?
Yes. Although at the moment I've got research leave till October.
Okay.
Just writing. I work hard writing stuff. That's going to be my occupation.
I follow you on X, and you're in the middle of writing another book. Is that right?
Yes. Well, I got a draft, and then the publishers want me to rework it quite a lot. So yes, I'm going to spend till March, new deadline, to sort of rejig things. Heresy is the working title. So sort of two things, how panpsychism kind of offers a unique way of bringing together the scientific and the spiritual, and then also religion as social technology rather than set of doctrines. Although maybe we'll.
That was those are some of the points on the email you sent me. Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about anything, but yeah, that it's probably not going to be out. It's not going to be out till 2027. Hopefully, early 2027.
You're going to address you call yourself a heretical Christian, by the way, which I'm going to ask about. Is that in that? Are you writing about that? Or
It's
no?
not going to be like, it's not going to be defending that. I want to.
It's not a thesis. There's nothing you're going to nail on the door. Okay.
Well, there is, but not the heretical Christianity. But that will come up, throughout it. This is me, but it's not like I'm going to persuade you of the one true faith. You know what I mean?
Persuade me. Help me.
Okay.
I loved your book, Why the Purpose of the Universe, and it might address more questions for me than answers. But, my journey, I think I wrote to you, is I've landed on openness. And I'm not talking about any kind of religion or anything. I'm just talking about in general. I just wanted to ask one of the most important questions, like, how did the ancient aliens build the pyramids?
Good question. That's going to be a chapter in my book.
In this hour, let's try to work out the ultimate nature of reality.
Okay. It's all right. We can do it.
I read an interview of George Saunders, who in this interview, he quotes Chekhov, saying that he said a work of art doesn't have to solve a problem, but it has to formulate the problem correctly. And so I've been living inside that line lately, Philip, more than maybe having definitive answers. The questions may be more important. So the book, Why the Purpose of the Universe, you explore consciousness and panpsychism and offer a middle ground between maybe traditional belief in God and secular atheism. And you suggest, your thesis is that the universe is oriented toward value and the emergence of complex life. And I'm conflating those two. So shall we start with consciousness, or where should we start here?
Oh, God, there's lots of different possibilities here. But I mean, well, just to agree with you, I think things are so inherently uncertain in this area. And there's too much certainty on both sides. For religious people, I think when people are thinking about religion, they think, maybe they're thinking about whether they should be religious. Is it definitely true? Is it all true? Oh, no, there's this one objection. But, on the atheist side as well, I think there is groupthink, and the stuff I wrote in this book, I was sort of drag kicking and screaming into accepting that I wanted to take it seriously, because I feel silly standing up in front of my peers and arguing about the purpose of the universe and so on. We're used to worrying about religious bias. Or do you just believe that because you were raised in a certain way? But there's secular bias as well. There's always groupthink. And, what I was trying to do in the Why book, I suppose, is explore the middle ground between that dichotomy we're always stuck in. Do you believe in the very traditional Western idea of God, or are you a secular atheist? Whose side are you on, Richard Dawkins or the Pope? Make your mind up, which team are you on? And I think we just neglect the middle ground options. And I guess what ultimately motivated it is, over a long period of time, I've just come to think that both sides of this, both teams have things they can't explain. And so that's a real motivation to explore middle ground options. So yeah, that was where I ended up with the Why book. But as you say, there's the theme of panpsychism in there as well. That's I've spent most of my career defending this wacky view that's somehow getting taken a bit more seriously. So yeah, where do you want to go? I'm happy with either or both.
So let's just real quickly sum up your case that the universe has a purpose.
Yes.
And it's the value hypothesis that the universe is producing some form of value in life. So, by the way, I think what you just said, and I agree with, is I think you made the case that both theism and atheism, what they have in common is this problem with certainty. But let me back up. It's funny that we jumped right into God and all that stuff, because it leads there. Because obviously, as I was reading the book, I'm like, well, what's he proposing here? Is it a God? Yeah. Is it just this living universe? Is the living universe a God? So let's back up. Tell me real quickly, if you can just sum up, and so we can, the value hypothesis. I think you made that case for the universe.
Oh, you've actually read the book. Brilliant. You've done your homework.
By the way, I have 10 notes, and I'm so glad you sent over the little notes that you sent this morning, because I was like, oh shit, how do I have so many questions. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. It's hard to know where to start with these fundamental questions. the one thing that's bothered me for a long time now is what's known as the fine-tuning of physics for life. This surprising discovery of recent decades that for life to be possible, certain numbers in physics had to fall in a very narrow range. And so on the face of it, it's wildly improbable that our universe would have got the right numbers for life just by chance. So, I mean, just the example that's probably most often discussed and puzzled over by physicists revolves around dark energy, which is the force that propels the accelerating expansion of the universe. Actually, it's quite recently we discovered the universe is not only expanding but accelerating. 1998, I think it was. I was a teenager, very interested in black holes and big bangs and stuff, and I actually remember this evidence coming out. Anyway, so when we measure the value of that force, the strength of that force, that's pushing the universe apart, we call dark energy. Could have been stronger, could have been weaker. Actually, it looks, at least according to our current theories, it looks like if that had been a tiny bit stronger, so the universe would have pushed apart a bit quicker, everything would have pushed apart so quickly that no two particles would have ever met. So you wouldn't have stars, you wouldn't have planets, you wouldn't have any kind of structure at all. Whereas if it had been a little bit weaker, it wouldn't have counteracted gravity, so everything would have collapsed. The universe would have collapsed back on itself a split second after the Big Bang. So to have a universe with kind of anything of value or interest, any kind of structural complexity, any kind of life, not just the life we know about, but any kind of life, it needed to fall in this quite narrow range. And it's just wildly improbable. That was just by chance. And so I think in our normal ways of thinking about evidence, I think this is evidence for some kind of goal-directedness in the early universe, weird as that sounds. And I don't go to the traditional God. I explore different ways of making sense of that. But I think that's where the evidence is pointing.
So this is not the gambler's fallacy, but the casino is apt a bit. So if I walked into a casino and I saw somebody let's say they roll sixes 70 times in a row, I'm going to assume they're cheating, right? So
yes.
it's just improbable. It's just intuitive. You're going to assume, something's up. And you make the case for, the probabilities of the universe that would produce life is along those same lines. Now, the poor man's counter, Steve Carroll maybe, would be that fine tuning assumes counterfactual universes. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor, not physical ontology. I mean, I'm not debating. I'm devil's advocating here. That's certainly a good case for some kind of purpose in the universe mathematically. But to me, that the journey I've been going down is consciousness. And like you, panpsychism, not at your level, and I had this conversation with Christoph Koch, right? And I think he's a panpsychist and that he thinks consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe. He believes in the integrated information theory of consciousness, and we touched on that a bit. But that's the rabbit hole I've gone down. Why are we not meaning zombies? Why do we have these inner experiences? And then I was reading your book and all these other books in parallel. Have you read Will to Meaning by Frankl, Viktor Frankl?
Oh, yeah, a long time ago. My English publisher I always change my publishers for some reason. For Galileo's Error, my first book aimed at a general audience was the same publisher, I think, as Frankl, which it stood out, which I was quite excited by at the time. I think, is that right? I'm like, yeah. But yeah, well, yes.
So that's where I am,
figure.
Is this will to meaning. It's like we have this natural inclination to ask why. I think Frankl's case is that just in the asking of why is pointing to something that's real, that meaning has some real context to it. And then in your book, you also explore consciousness. Specifically, you call out panpsychism. Sorry, and I meandered, but add that to the case of a purposeful universe. Is it the question of why do we have this subjective feelings? Why do we have this will to meaning? And don't let me put words in your mouth here, but
yeah, I mean, just on Frankl, actually, that did come up in an interview not too long ago. There happened to be, there was a big piece on my Why book in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. Actually, for some reason, a journalist at this big Israeli newspaper got very interested in, and we had a wonderful long discussion. But then his final question took me aback and said, well, how would people suffering in both Israel and Gaza learn something from this? And I was like, oh my God,
wow.
I
Oh my
haven't,
God.
I haven't prepared this answer. And I can only say, like, from my very privileged perspective, I could talk about how meaning in life has helped me. But there are other people who have suffered terribly. Frankl was a Holocaust survivor, wasn't he? Who have found not just comfort, but meaning in thinking about these big questions. So it's not just, I think this is important because it's not just a sort of bourgeois indulgence or an abstract intellectual question. I remember getting that someone asking me that at my book launch that I did with Philip Pullman, actually, the novelist. And someone said, oh, what's the point in thinking there's people don't have enough food to eat? But I think it is important to ask these big questions for life as it is lived as well. But yeah, consciousness and meaning. So the consciousness chapter in my book has a warning at the start, just because I think it's the most challenging of the book. So I'm glad you read it. So I kind of had the book set up that people can skip around, skip bits.
That was clever, and I
yeah.
think very useful too. I was like, oh, this is good. Yeah.
Yeah. Each chapter has a digging deeper section where, if you don't want to go into all the details, you don't have to. Here's one way into the issue of consciousness that's not one of the big questions that's normally focused on, and maybe is separate from the case to panpsychism. We could come back to that because there's so many different.
And by the way, the way I set it up may be false, but you tell me. I'm taking the value hypothesis. I'm just taking snippets, right, of what the case you made for the purpose of the universe. That and consciousness seem to be the two pieces that you hang on this thesis to make the case.
Yes.
So, but is that right? Okay,
that's right. So I suppose
that's what I'm marrying here.
The book is there's my critique of the traditional God is the familiar problem of why is there suffering, and then my critique of traditional atheism is fine tuning and consciousness. Now the fine tuning stuff, whatever you think of it, it's a bit easier to state, but the consciousness stuff is tricky. But here's one way into it. A really neglected question: why did consciousness evolve? To forget the big questions of, how do brains make consciousness stuff? Why did it evolve? Because natural selection is only interested in behavior, right? That's all that matters for survival. And thanks to AI and robotics, I think we now know that you can have incredibly sophisticated information processing and behavior without any kind of inner life, without any experience. So why didn't natural selection just make us very, very complicated survival mechanisms, sort of like biological robots that mechanically track the environment, initiate survival behavior in a very efficient way? Why does natural selection care about our inner lives? And so I think, panpsychism isn't going to address this, because you could say, okay, if you're a panpsychist, everything's conscious, and so organisms are going to be conscious. Maybe, but if you think about our consciousness, it's not just that we're conscious. We have conscious understanding of the world built into our experience. If I look around me right now, I don't just see colors and shapes. I see a laptop, a face. I hear meaningful words. The meanings of the words is sort of built into my experience. So it's built into our consciousness what things are and mean. And I just think without saying more, there's no evolutionary explanation of that because natural selection just cares about behavior. So that doesn't get us to purpose immediately, but there's something going on here that our current scientific paradigm hasn't even begun to address.
I hesitate to use the word design.
No. So some people, a couple of Christian philosophers, Dustin Crummett and, oh my God, my mind's gone blank. He's a good friend of mine. Anyway, Dustin Crummett is his co-author. Have defended God on this basis, and I've got YouTube discussions with them if people are interested. But I think that's a bit too quick. I think there are other solutions to this, but I think they all lead to some kind of radical departure from our current scientific worldview. Because if you just had our standard Darwinian story, I think you'd just get complicated survival mechanisms. So, the view I explore in the book is this view I call panagentialism. So the panpsychist view is that the very simple forms of consciousness go all the way down to the basic building blocks of the universe. That electrons and quarks have very, very simple forms of conscious experience. What this panagentialist view adds to that is free will does the same thing, that free will in some very simple form exists at the base of matter. And I think this sounds even more bizarre than panpsychism, but I actually think it
Christoph
addresses
Koch made
this
that
problem.
point too.
Right.
There was some form of agency down at those
Right. Yeah.
little
I mean,
bits of consciousness.
there are a lot of scientists taking this more and more seriously. I mean, look, just the more we've explored the natural world, the more we realize that things like intelligence and agency are present in plants and trees. You know, certain God, I'm blanking on names today. Who is the scientist who's a female scientist who's most known for her empirical work revealing the extraordinary intelligence of trees and how they share information between species, and she was
Communicate through the
dismissed as, you
roots.
know, yeah, exactly, hippie bullshit when she first started talking about it, and it's now not controversial at all. But yes, so the idea that agency is part of the basic stuff for the physical world. And I think once you've got that in place, you can start to make sense of why consciousness evolved. Because if we think of agency as a way of sort of responding rationally and appropriately to your conscious understanding of the world, now natural selection has a reason to give us conscious understanding. Because maybe if we get conscious understanding and we can respond rationally to it, respond appropriately with respect to our desires and beliefs about the world, and you can start to see how that would make you survive. And maybe that's a sort of shortcut to good survival. Maybe it'd be more complicated for natural selection to make these very, very complicated mechanisms that survive well, but maybe just giving us conscious understanding and agency to respond to that is a shortcut to making us survive well. So that's the kind of picture I lay out. So I think that, you know, that's a way of explaining this that doesn't straightforwardly commit to God or cosmic purpose. But now, you know, we start to get this picture of the world where consciousness and agency are there at the start, and where the numbers in physics are just right for that consciousness and agency to evolve to a higher form of itself. There are no proofs here, but this starts to look closer to a picture of the world where there is some kind of purpose and goal directedness there from the start. Again, you know, it don't need to be too anthropomorphic about this. It's not, you know, some intelligent designer sitting out there fiddling, but there are all sorts of ways we can make sense of this idea of what philosophers call teleology, from the Greek word telos, for purpose.
Yeah, you call it teleological cosmopsychism.
Yeah, so that's I guess the view I'm most attracted to, that the universe itself is conscious. You know, Alfred North Whitehead, very interesting panpsychist thinker, late 19th, 20th century. He thought, you know, we should get rid of this. Newton thought of the universe as a clockwork mechanism. He thought a better analogy, again, it's an analogy, better analogy is a kind of organism, thinking of the universe itself as a sort of conscious organism with its own goals. And then we don't have to postulate a supernatural designer. Maybe the universe sort of fine-tuned itself. And again, you know, it's going to be a very alien kind of mind. It's not going to be the same kind of mind that evolved creatures that we find in ourselves. But if you're a panpsychist, you know, our consciousness is just one highly specific form of something that exists in the universe more generally. So yeah, it all sounds a little bit wacky perhaps, but I think these ideas can be made rigorous, scientifically respectable sense of, and I think more and more people are coming to see that. And it's been exciting to be part of that the last decade or two.
And I'm going to point people to the book because there's a lot there that leads up to the conclusion that you come to in the book, or the thesis that there's a purpose to the universe, because we just don't have time to cover all of the rigorous math and the exploration of consciousness. But real quickly, what do you think is the purpose of the universe?
Just before I answer that, one other thing I was going to say when you raised Christoph Koch earlier. Yeah, I just interviewed him myself, actually, for my Substack. If people are interested, he was one of my first guests. And yeah,
really?
Well, I was at a conference with him recently, bringing together philosophers working on panpsychism with scientists working on integrated information theory, like Christoph, which is one of the leading contenders for a science of consciousness. But there are close connections between these two things. And I thought, you know, his talk would be on, you know, the latest evidence for his theory of consciousness or neuroscientific data or whatever, but he just talked about his mystical experience he's had. Did you talk about this?
Yes,
which has transformed his life.
He's had some, you could call it almost near religious experience. I mean, it's so evident when he's talking, this experience that he had. And by the way, I think if I remember the conversation correctly, that I think he thinks that the universe is mind, this great mind. But man, and by the way, this is so interesting. I was just talking to a group of people about this, that when I either interview or listen to an interview or somebody that's either an atheist or a scientist who have had a psychedelic experience and they recount the experience, it sounds like they actually went somewhere when they talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose there's lots of different kinds of experiences of psychedelic films, so on. But I mean, it's striking to me, and this is what I've been researching a lot for my new book. It's striking to me that there is a very distinctive kind of experience that we find crops up for people in all of the different religious traditions. An experience where, and this seemed to be akin to what Christoph was having, an experience where people having it feel as though they're somehow in direct contact with ultimate reality, whether they call it God or ultimate or some kind of wondrous ultimate reality. And moreover, that they're in some sense deeply unified with it or even one with it. And we find this, it's just striking, whatever you make of it, that we find it in all the religious traditions, including the Abrahamic faiths, where the people who have these experiences have often got in a bit of trouble. So, I'm very interested in Meister Eckhart, 13th century, very important and interesting mystic, Christian mystic, who, went on trial for heresy because he seemed to be saying he'd experienced that he was God. Not that he was, God, particularly unique for being God incarnate, but that we are all God. And he died.
By the way, I just want to say
the trial was complete. But
I wanted to say, just for the audience, that Christoph Koch, I think it was DMT, I'm not sure, but he also said he was scared shitless. Like, it was very frightening. So I'm not encouraging somebody to just willy-nilly go tripping. Disclaimer. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. But I mean, no, I think just on Meister Eckhart, scholars now think he actually ripped off a lot of his ideas from Marguerite Porete, another mystic who was actually burnt at the stake. And there are, in the Islamic tradition, there are Sufi mystics who were also burnt for similar views. And I've been also researching, there's Kabbalah as well in the Jewish tradition. And I was, one of the scholars of Kabbalah I was reading about saying maybe Jewish people have got in less trouble for this, perhaps because they've had less access to state power than Christians or Muslims, or they've managed to talk about mystical experiences in the language of tradition. Kabbalah means tradition. But anyway, we find these similar experiences. And
that's fascinating.
And it connects to panpsychism, I think, because if you've got a more conventional scientific worldview where consciousness just pops up in in later periods of evolution or something, and it's just kind of information processing, then I guess you've got to think mystical experiences like these are just delusions, just funny chemicals in your brain. But if you're already a panpsychist, and I guess this is what I was talking to Christoph about, if you're already a panpsychist and you think, we have direct access to our consciousness, and consciousness is the ultimate nature of reality, then you're more open to taking mystical experiences seriously. So, yeah, I mean, well, this is going, I guess, into my sort of new turn of my work with this new book I'm writing. But yeah, coming back to the $1 million, I'm like a politician dodging the $1 million question. What's the purpose of the universe? So, I mean, I get in the why book, I wasn't saying anything definitive. I was just saying, look, there's this evidence that there is some kind of goal-directedness. Maybe it's finished. Maybe we're the culmination. Maybe it was just a goal-directedness.
I just want to give you my experience. I was like reading the book, and you were building up this tension in me that I never got released. And I was like, but then what do I do?
I suppose the final chapter is reflecting on the possible meaning and significance for human existence. And I think even if it is all vague, even if it is all vague and uncertain, I try to suggest there's life benefits from living in hope that this isn't the end of the cosmic purpose, that there is some greater reality to come, even if we can't exactly pin it down. I've found it's helped in my, as I say, I've quite a privileged existence, and I found it's helped me with my sort of ambition, I suppose. my ambition is probably my weakness. I don't crave power or money, but I suppose I'm a bit sort of craving success or something. And I think it's helped me to just feel part of something bigger that's going on, and that you're only inevitably a tiny part of some bigger thing that's going on. And your job is just to do the best you can to contribute to this bigger project. That was the why book. But since then, I guess I've returned to religion. I kind of went a bit public about that. I've had some recent discussions with that. I now self-identify as a heretical Christian. And that was, I guess, the confluence of the two things we've been talking about, really. Taking more and more seriously mystical experiences and mystical traditions, and discovering the mystical traditions of Christianity that I was completely unaware of, that are very different to US evangelical Protestantism that many people think is what Christianity is. And also, in particular, discovering the Eastern Christianity. There's a very mystical understanding of Christianity, all about sort of God and the universe coming into harmony, becoming one. So that, on the one hand, they're the sort of heart reasons. And then also this, on a more intellectual level, this with fine-tuning consciousness, this taking more seriously that there is some purpose to reality. So that was the more the head things. And then I suppose the two coming together for me in this slightly heretical, Eastern Orthodox inspired form of Christianity. Again, it's all very uncertain, but it's brought me community. It's brought me spiritual practice. It's brought me great joy. It's helped me with my weaknesses. So that's what I'm up to. And that's the next book.
Let me share with you my experience where I kind of landed after reading the book, or reading the book. So as soon as I read the book, I told you I went down the rabbit hole. I picked up the book Will to Meaning that I hadn't read in decades. And after reading your book, I didn't come to any conclusions so much as things were stirred up in me, but they were good things. And I guess that I wrap it around the theme of meaning, that life is purposeful in a sense that if the universe in fact is a universe of purpose, that it is now, I'm experiencing that from a standpoint of creating beauty. I just started recognizing that maybe meaning, things that are meaningful, is maybe more substantive than just ephemeral. So when I cry at a movie, or if I'm touched by someone or feel deeply, I kind of lean into it now.
Yeah.
And even though I don't have anything concrete, I say there's something real here. There's something real. The feeling that I have, whatever feels meaningful to me, is pointing to something real. I don't know what, but just that has been helpful to me. And then I was reading an email. I just read an email by Kevin Kelly. It was just a newsletter. And he had this whole thing about, I think it was titled, How Will the Miracle Happen Today? And it's just an essay on the concept of accepting and relying on the generosity and kindness of strangers. Because he traveled a lot in hitchhiking and what have you. But he's recalling all these numerous acts of kindness. And then he actually calls it accepting generosity as being kinded, and explaining receiving a gift requires a state of openness and humility. So then he basically concludes by saying that life itself is an unearned gift, and true spiritual faith rests on kind of gratitude and understanding our indebtedness. And that his friends call this pronoia, which I thought was cool. It's the belief that everyone is out to help you. So that, your book and thinking about the purpose of the universe and meaning, I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm trying to realize that life is this unearned gift, and I'm trying to be grateful and pay it forward, if you will. I meandered, but I was trying to bring it home.
No, that's great. Yeah, I'd like to say two things on that, actually. So firstly, I think a lot of what I'm doing at the moment with this new book is developing. I just want to defend the idea that it's intellectually respectable to trust the kinds of experiences you're talking about. I think, we have this idea that it's not intellectually serious. It's just sort of fluffy feelings. But this is dependent on really what I think of as bad philosophy, which is what we can call scientism, the view that the only way of knowing about reality is from experiments. That's the only way of knowing about reality. Why think that? Science is wonderful. And I think we're going through a period of history where it's been so successful, people think that's the complete story, that's everything. But it's not the only way of knowing about reality, right? Here's another way of knowing about reality: our immediate awareness of our consciousness, of our feelings and experiences. Consciousness is not known about from experiments. You can't, look down a microscope or a particle collider. We know about pain because we feel it. Daniel Dennett, the late great Daniel Dennett, who I spent a week on a boat in the Arctic with once, and we had some nice chats. Wow. He was consistent with this. He understood, he think, my consciousness is not empirically, objectively measurable, so it doesn't exist. So that's one way of knowing about. Here's another way of knowing about reality: mathematical intuition. I think, the laws of mathematics and logic, which I think of as the necessary constraints on reality. People think, oh, well, that's just kind of trivial, isn't it? 2 + 2 is 4. Well, no, there were big discussions in the early 20th century of trying to reduce mathematics to trivial logical facts. And, for example, Gödel's incompleteness theorem that proves that you can't deduce algorithmically all the truths of arithmetic brought that crashing down. So I think Plato was right at the start of Western philosophy, that through our mathematical intuition, we access this timeless realm of mathematical truth. So that's another way we know about reality independent of experiences. The third way I would want to defend is our knowledge of value. I think we encounter value in ordinary experience. I was being moved over the Christmas listening to Beethoven's late string quartets, and you just feel you're encountering something of great value face to face. And it's not just pleasure. It's not just, oh, I like it, maybe you don't. Maybe you like, I don't know, Barbie Girl, the songs.
Yeah. I'm looking at a sunset. It's, what moves me is the scientific fact or the photons. Yes. It's presented in experience. Yeah.
I think
it suggests value.
If you don't see the value in Bach, for example, or Beethoven, you're missing something. Maybe you get that value somewhere else, of course. But if you think, oh no, it's rubbish, there's nothing there, you are not seeing something in the way people who are blind do not see things in the room around them. So I think there's at least 4 ways of knowing about reality. Experiments, very important. Our immediate awareness of our consciousness, mathematical intuition, value intuition. And what we need to remember, we need to dump scientism and remember that the importance of philosophy, which I think of as a task of synthesis, of taking all these things and unifying them into a unified picture of the world. From that perspective, I think spiritual experiences are not weird and supernatural, and they are part of life, an intellectually acceptable part of life. Well, that was just the first thing I wanted to say, but maybe the other thing I was want to say is, the way I'm thinking about religion at the moment is thinking of it as social technology rather than a set of doctrines. Throughout human history, being spiritual has been a social phenomenon. We've always had social structures that connect people's spirituality to the community, to the changing of the seasons, to the big moments of life, birth, marriage, coming of age, death. And then suddenly in modern times, it's just a thing you do on your own. Like I'll have my own yoga classes or something. I love yoga, but, so I just want to tell people, look, I suppose I have come to a sort of something closer to traditional Christian belief, although in a slightly heretical way. But I want to say, if you don't believe it, there's real benefits to being part of an organized religion if you can make it work. Take it all as a big metaphor if you want. There's a guy in my church who physics professor who doesn't believe any of it, but he's a very spiritual person, and it connects his spiritual life to the community, and he's there. So I'm not trying to push anything on anyone. I'm not saying, but I just want to get that across as an option, that a way of seeing, at least in liberal religious communities, a way of seeing religion as a way of connecting your spiritual life to the community. And, the beliefs are there and we can think about them. And I'm not saying, get rid of them all, but it's not the only thing.
Let's bring this at the personal level here. We're already there. What type of church do you go to? Where did you land?
I have found my spiritual home in the combination of the mysticism of the Eastern Church and the liberal flexibility of the Anglican Church. So I guess the core of my Christianity is inspired by the core of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, which, is nothing to do with Jesus being punished for our sins. It's to do with God and the universe becoming unified. But
This
I'm
is
not
an
a member
Anglican?
of these.
This is an
No, this is
you're
the Eastern Orthodox
Eastern Orthodox.
Church.
Okay.
But so, I guess the three big forms of Christianity: Catholicism, Eastern Orthodox. There was the big split around 1,000 years after the start of Christianity. And then 500 years after that, you've got Protestantism and various forms of Protestantism. So my spiritual core is what the Eastern Orthodox Church thinks, but I'm not a member of that church.
Okay.
Because
I'm just
I don't
curious as
like,
to,
because
your
I'm also a
attendance.
bit heretical. I don't think God's all powerful. And I don't like, for example, that they don't have women priests, and that, strictly speaking, gay sex is sinful. I don't know how seriously they take that, but whereas what I love about the Church of England is, it was sort of set up. It was the Episcopal Church in the US. It was set up because the king wanted a divorce, Henry VIII, and the Pope wouldn't let him. So it doesn't have the big ideology of other Protestant movements. It has the traditional forms like Catholicism, but it tends to be very flexible. And so, if you just had one of them, I wouldn't want just liberal flexibility, because then it's a bit sort of empty or wet. But with that spiritual core, but the flexibility to sort of interpret it in your own way or take it bloody metaphorically.
You want your cake and eat it. I know what you're
do.
So do you
But why
pray?
not?
Do you pray?
I meditate every morning, and I pray every night. So I suppose I listen to God in the morning and talk to God at night. But
what is a prayer? What is a Philip Goff prayer? Not a meditation. What is it? Are you asking, or are you just expressing?
No, I don't.
Or are you,
I think,
or thanking, or what? I'm really curious as to your spiritual.
I've just dropped one of my headphones on the floor. Oh, it's all right. I think I can still hear you. Yeah, no, it's not about asking a list of requests. I suppose it's fundamentally about kind of trying to orientate myself to the purposes of the universe rather than my own purposes. Not to give up my own purposes, but to see them as part of some bigger thing going on. So, I start with the Lord's Prayer. And I think so I sort of meditate on each of those phrases. And I suppose when I say thy will be done, I'm trying to orientate myself to conceiving of what I'm trying to do as part of some bigger good purpose to reality. I suppose our Father who art in heaven, I suppose I'm thinking of the whole thing. I suppose I'm thinking of there being love or something of great value at the core of reality. And I suppose I find that comforting and inspiring. And if that is true, then you would want to be in alignment with it. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? If there is some big purpose to reality, you're not going to say, well, I'm still just going to do my own thing. You're going to want to be part of that. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those sin against us. But, you think about people who've wronged you, or people who you think of as bad people in the world stage, and you try to love them. Bit tricky. Or you think of wrong things you've done. And it's about thinking about people I know and love who are suffering. The way my brain works, I can be a bit thoughtless. I think I'm an empathetic person, but I can just forget. So I can be really caring about a loved one who's unwell, and then I'll just forget. So it's good when I pray and I can bring them back to mind. And so thinking about the day that's past, thinking about the day that's to come, trying to get myself in I don't know what the word is really, for sleep, a kind of calm way, ready for sleep. So I think of it as a practical thing, connecting my life to something bigger going on. And
I often recite the Serenity Prayer.
Yes. Yeah, no, I love this. The courage to change I forgot it.
The serenity to accept the things
the serenity, of course.
The courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
To know the difference. Very, very beautiful, very important. Yeah. Well, when I meditate, I begin with a kind of prayer of, I guess, asking God, but I'm not sort of expecting some action, but to sort of, for my mind to be filled with truth, my heart with love, and my soul with peace, and trying to orientate myself to those. And the last one is the hardest for me. I think I'm naturally very passionate about truth. I think I'm quite empathetic, but peace, not aiming to be the most famous philosopher in the world, aiming for peace, is the thing that's most hard for me. So that's what I've benefited from meditating and praying. And then I suppose what the church bit adds is, with communion, you bring that spirituality to the community, you know, and see. I like that the central act of worship is something communal, sort of symbolic, eating and drinking, and seeing the community as somehow connecting to something bigger, and that seeping out into the world outside. And yeah, can I say one thing about meditation?
Please.
Yeah, so I meditate 25 minutes a day. I'm always awake for 2 hours in the middle of the night between sleep cycles, and I used to worry about that, but I just go to bed early now. So yeah, I meditate and then read. But meditation, actually, we talked about Meister Eckhart earlier, and I found what he talks about making a lot of sense of my meditation experiences. He has this beautiful metaphor for God as a pan of boiling water, constantly sort of bubbling up with love and joy and creativity, sort of essentially, maybe I was thinking a good way to put it would be sort of counter entropic. You know, we're bound by the second law of thermodynamics that we're sort of run out of energy, you know, and then we eat more and we sleep, but then we run out of energy and we get old and we die. But he thought like God is sort of essentially energetic and creative, and then he thought creation is where the water kind of bubbles over the pan. Anyway, but I have found that making sense of my meditation experience to the extent that as I've managed over a long time to calm the mind, just feeling that natural energy bubbling up, you know, when it's going well, and that's been wonderful in life.
I have a dear friend who was in Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, and they always appeal to a higher power.
Yes.
And I love that framing, because in those meetings, it could be God if you want, or it could be just the strength of a group is a higher power than the individual, you know, or
right.
whatever. We all have to acknowledge there are higher powers in our lives, and I think that's kind of how I've made peace with it all. That
I would like people to be able to engage with organized religion in that way, to sort of say, I believe in something.
There's a sense of humility. There's a sense of humility to.
And, you know, look, I don't think faith is about certainty. I think it's about trust, hope, commitment. I think this slightly heretical Eastern Orthodox inspired form of Christianity, I've come to think of it as a credible possibility because it makes sense of mystical experiences. It makes sense of fine tuning and so on. But it might not be true. I wouldn't say I believe it, actually, because belief suggests to me you'd be surprised if it were false. You know, things you believe, if you find out it's not false, you're like, oh my God. Whereas I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't true. I wouldn't be surprised if it was true. But that's still amazing that I wouldn't be. It's like a wonderful vision of reality, and that it could be true. That it could be true. So just, you know, if it turns out to all be false, look, I've got these wonderful life benefits and community. I don't care. That's, you know. Anyway, go on.
Look, I want to be aware of the time here. I just want to, in my own life, be softer, overcome my cynicism. I want to have more awe in my life. I think humans are animated by some basic drive to know where they came from and what force animates us. I just think that's part of it. I think to a degree, we're all like Frankenstein's monster. You know, we want to know the creator, and not necessarily to worship that, but to understand himself, origin and meaning. So Philip, this was great.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? You mentioned a Substack.
Thanks, Larry. It's been a really enjoyable conversation. I think we concur largely. The Substacks thing I'm focusing on most, I guess, and X. I suppose I write a lot on X or Blue Sky.
You do. Yes, you do.
A lot of so all the liberals went to Blue Sky at one point, and I thought I'd do both. I don't like splitting community. I co-host a YouTube channel, Mind Chat, with my friend Keith Frankish, who has the polar opposite opinions to me. He thinks consciousness doesn't exist in a certain sense of that word.
I'll
consciousness.
Have to check that out.
We don't do it all that often these days. I think our plan is to do one every 2 months or something, partly because I don't know, we do have very different philosophy and we want to do our own thing, but it is fun to get together and interview people from this very different perspectives. And he was a disciple of Daniel Dennett, who's so the polar opposite to me. I think consciousness is everywhere. He thinks it's nowhere. But partly what we're kind of trying to model discussion in polarized times, model respectful disagreement in these polarized times, you know. And I mean, I love engaging with people I disagree with and trying to get inside their heads. Why the hell do you think that? And, you know, a lot of people think that about me. You know, why the hell do you think the universe is conscious. So trying to understand why people very different to you think the way they do is cool. So yeah, I think that's about it, really, is it? Probably forgotten something. Oh, my website, philipgoffphilosophy.com. Got a lot of stuff on there.
I'll put this and your book in the show notes and resources. Have you written anything about Christ at all and your views?
I have an article with it. When I went public with all this stuff, I did an article with Aeon magazine, Aeon, on the
That's
religion
just for
stuff.
me. This is just for me. I want to.
I've got an academic paper on my website, Christianity and a God of Limited Powers. That's a bit boring and dry, though. I mean, actually, I did a recent interview with Alex O'Connor's channel, a very big philosophy channel. That was really going into the depths of my heretical Christianity. That was the whole. Yeah. That's probably a good way to learn more about that if you're interested.
Just for the audience, because we mentioned heretical Christianity a couple times, so I know everybody's thinking, well, what is that? That and I know some of it is no virgin birth, some of that, but
yes.
But I want to point to somebody. Thank you again. This was helpful for me, and I'm sure it will be for our audience.
Oh, thanks very much, Larry. That was really fun discussion.
Okay, so what does this all mean? I don't have an answer for you, but let me share where I landed after this chat and after reading the book. The psychologist James Gibson argued that we aren't passive observers of our world. We are agents looking for possibilities. He called these possibilities affordances. It's the idea that we encounter the world in terms of what it lets us do. For example, a large room affords exploration. A floor affords walking. A chair affords sitting. A path affords movement, and so on. Affordances are relationships. They are openings. We don't see the world as abstract data. We see it as a series of invitations. So, if Philip is right, if the universe is fine-tuned for value, just maybe the universe affords purpose in the same way. It doesn't dictate our path any more than a floor tells you where to walk, but it provides the terrain where purpose is possible. It's as if the universe is saying, here's what I made. Appreciate it. Check it out. Explore it. It's afforded to you. Now go do something. Go create. This includes the hard parts. Even a setback is an affordance, a chance to pivot or to suffer for something larger than ourselves. Maybe even random events are pregnant with purpose, if we look at them as openings in the terrain of a meaningful life. So I'm looking at it this way. The cosmos gives us the floor. We supply the movement. Meaning isn't decoded, it's enacted. My role is to explore the space of possibilities with a sense of rational hope. And thinking this way makes me feel less cynical and more attentive. I'm leaning into those meaningful moments now, seeing them as points on a map, maybe even pointing toward the purpose of the universe itself. Thanks for listening. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, do share it with your friends and on your social platforms. Big thanks to Sam Williams, my audio guy, and the beautiful bumper music you're hearing is Michael Petrovich's Bella Luna. For all my show notes or resource links, visit larryweeks.com, and we will talk again soon.